Listen, life's all about leveling up. Whether you're handling business on the field or kicking it in your zone, you like to celebrate with cigars that match the moment. That's why you should link up with Famous Cigars to bring you a wild deal. Right now, you can grab 8 premium cigars for just $8. You heard that right. 8 top-rated cigars at $1 a stick. Top quality brands like Oliva, Romeo y Julieta, and Davidoff. Handpicked just for you and worth over $80. Hit up famouscigars.com/cam and lock in this exclusive deal. While you're there, check out their insane selection of premium cigars, all shipped fresh and fast from their massive 20,000 square foot humidor. That's half a football field. Famous Cigars has been in the game since 1939 and still family owned. So celebrate every win with the folks at Famous. 8 cigars for $8. famouscigars.com/cam.
The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to The Timeline, a Phoenix Suns podcast. That sucks, Sam.
Shout out to the Timeline faithful, the ones who will listen to this episode, because for the group therapy, or I guess whatever this is going to become, because that was brutal.
Yeah.
It was brutal in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it was definitely brutal. It was crazy because the first half of that game, of course, we had the Devin Booker masterclass, essentially one of the best halves of his career, if not the best half of his career. Also included the dapping up of the baby, which was one of the most wholesome things I've ever seen on a NBA court. And then the second half came, and it was clear that even during the first half, as it was happening, you could kind of feel that Devin Booker was keeping them alive in a way that maybe wasn't overly sustainable. So you can sort of see the writing on the wall a little bit, but they really kind of fell apart. In particular in the fourth quarter, which is a very rare sighting for the Suns without Devin Booker. I do think that him coming out of the locker room, going into the locker room, coming back out, the body language, understanding what the issues were going to be without him on the floor, I think that affected the focus of the rest of the players on the court. And I think you could just feel that. It's obviously something they can overcome as far as whether he plays or not in the next game. But I do think that their focus was dramatically impacted by that.
I hate how I can't even enjoy the fist bumping the baby clip now, because it's just, that was so cool. That clip was so cool. I mean, you got how many people watched that tonight? You posted it on Twitter. Did 2 million people watch that already?
I have
or something
no idea.
Like that? And it's just
let me see. 1.4 million views right now.
Yeah. And who cares,
Yeah.
Because now this new situation looms over the series. I mean, we can't really speculate. You said you saw the clip, so I'd like you to talk about it in a second. I did not see it, but it's just, to speak broadly about the situation, it's not so much the loss that bothers me. There are things that really bothered me about the way the team performed tonight, because in many ways I thought it was an embarrassing effort, but it doesn't impact the way I view the series going forward.
Same.
But if Booker misses the rest of the series, it impacts the way you view the series going forward. So that's all. Unfortunately, even as I was kind of praying that they could claw their way back in and pull out in the fourth quarter, in the back of my head, the injury was all I was really thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of people who are watching the Suns now that didn't watch the Suns the way that we and everyone who listened to this podcast did throughout the regular season got a taste of how important Devin Booker is to this team. And you could just see it. The amount of attention he draws defensively, and the fact that, we talked a lot about the Pelicans having essentially one good perimeter defender. Well, if the Suns only have one great perimeter player, it's not as big of a negative for them, right? The strength of the Suns team is having two, and you take one out of there, and it becomes really difficult to operate in the offense. In the fourth quarter stretch, one thing I thought was interesting was the players that Monty had on the court were Chris Paul, Mikal Bridges, Jay Crowder, Cameron Johnson, and DeAndre Ayton. So assuming Devin Booker is out, we don't really know. There's 2 games between now and the next game, which is kind of nice. There's an extra day at the very least for him to recover. I assume that could be the starting lineup that they go with, or at least the lineup that plays the most minutes in the next game. Devin Booker did have a injury in the finals, a hamstring injury. Felt as actually, based on what I've seen, pretty similar to this one. What I saw in the clip, Sam, since you mentioned it, is on the last Jackson Hayes fast break attempt before Devin Booker went out in the third quarter, it was just Devin Booker full court sprinting back, jumping up, and then immediately reaching back to his hamstring. Not a lot you could see because the actual broadcast immediately cut to Jackson Hayes' reaction where he was talking to Floyd Mayweather. But we've seen Devin Booker reach back at his hamstring before, right? It's happened in the regular season. Usually in the regular season, that's like a week to 2 week injury where he misses a few games. He just reaches back and grab it. But, a hamstring injury like that, it could vary. The severity of that injury could vary. So right now we are playing in a little bit of the unknowns. But when it happened in the finals, he did play. Probably shouldn't have, right? Probably wouldn't have if it wasn't the NBA Finals. So we'll see how it impacts him going forward.
I mean, theoretically, we're speculating right now, but like, let's say it was going to be an injury where you're supposed to miss a week or two. Is this team isn't really good enough? I mean, this team can beat the New Orleans Pelicans without Devin Booker in a series theoretically, but it's going to be really tough. You can't take that chance. You cannot take that chance. So, if it's something that he can play through, then he'll have to play through. But would it also impact the way that he plays throughout the rest of the playoffs if you do advance beyond the first round? Yes, it will. So this
you have to be careful. Yeah,
has just become a really, really tough situation, man. Really tough.
Yeah, you have to be careful for as far as the Suns and the decision they make. They have to be smart with this because, you take it's funny having this conversation on a Suns podcast, but like you take Devin Booker out of it and you're trying say you have to rank the best offensive players on the court. If you combine both teams, well, 2 of the 3 best offensive players would now be Pelicans players.
That's all that matters. That's really all it is. I mean, it came down. So to break down, I guess, a little bit more of what happened on the basketball court tonight. The Suns lost this game in the third quarter with terrible transition defense. They played terrible transition defense all night. Even once they got the game back in the fourth quarter, it got down to clutch time. Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum tip your cap because they made really, really tough shots, and that's exactly what you're talking about. Now, when you get into the late game execution portion of the series, say the Suns are playing without Devin Booker, you've got one guy who can hit difficult shots and is a triple threat from any spot on the floor, Chris Paul, and they have 2 of those guys, Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum. And when you have 2 teams with an equal number of guys on either side who can fulfill those roles, that's when all of the other stuff, the coaching, the late game execution, that's when that stuff really comes into play and can serve as a tiebreaker. But when it's 2 of those guys who can hit tough shots versus one guy who can hit tough shots, in my opinion, there's not as much that you can really do to level the playing field. Obviously, that's not to be disrespectful about what some of the Suns role players can do, because a lot of them certainly played like trash tonight, and they can do much better in the series moving forward. Yeah. But just like you were saying, this offense doesn't work as designed without both heads of the snake.
Yeah.
Chris Paul, if he's the only one on offense who can make those types of shots, suddenly you see the Pelicans coming out and hedging and recovering on Chris Paul, a coverage that Willie Green would never play if Devin Booker was also on the floor. That's the entire reason why in Game 1 they resorted to stuff like switching instead, and then Chris Paul killed the switch. But the only reason that mismatch exists for Phoenix is because of Devin Booker's on-ball, off-ball gravity, and yeah, we all know that. So yeah, I don't know how many different ways I can say this is about to become a fucking dogfight, depending on what happens in the rest of the series, depending on what happens with Book's health.
Yeah, I mean, like, schematically, there's a ton of things the Suns could clean up. It's not like it's the type of thing where they're looking at actual game plans and thinking, oh, there's no adjustments to be made here. There's nothing we can do. There's a ton of stuff they could do better. Monty, from the beginning, you could hear him yelling at them to get back in transition, and truthfully, weren't doing that very well. They were not communicating well, and honestly, a lot of it came down to Jay Crowder. Poor Jay Crowder had one of the worst games of his life, offensively and defensively.
He had an embarrassing game. I'm a big Jay Crowder fan. I've defended him all season long in the starting lineup. I firmly have believed that he deserves that starting spot over Cam Johnson. I think it's worked for the Suns. You don't go against what works, what's good for chemistry. I think there are so many things on defense that I love to point out about Jay Crowder that I don't think necessarily all Suns fans appreciate. Tonight, he was embarrassing on both ends of the floor. And, I called my shot before the game. I said, there's no way he plays that bad 2 games in a row. He played worse.
He did play worse
than in game 1.
Even the shooting was, better, I guess you could say, in that he had 5 points. But
it was
he's the main guy that's got to run back in transition in a lot of these scenarios. Look,
also he was 0 for 5 from deep, so the shooting wasn't really from deep, better
and
either.
honestly, he made basically 1-3 with his foot on the line that could have made him 1 for 6. And guess who else was 1 for 6? Cameron Johnson.
Yeah,
if you talk about potentially switching Cameron Johnson out for Jay Crowder, there's a lot better track record for Cameron Johnson shooting better than 1 for 6, but not a lot since his injury. So you still kind of have to see it, I think, for me to feel a little more confident in that. As far as Jay Crowder goes, this is one of the worst shooting stretches of his career. It's like they were cursed right at the end of the season and unable to hit shots at that point. And on the other end of that, the Pelicans, who are the 27th best three-point shooting team in the NBA, shot 54.5% from 3 in this game, which in some ways is a hopeful stat for the Suns in that it's hard to believe they can continue to do that. Now, they did make some personnel changes, like playing Trey Murphy III a little more minutes that allowed them to hit more shots, but it was other guys hitting shots in this game too. Like Herb Jones played pretty well, 2 for 3.
Jose
Brandon
Alvarado
Ingram
went 2 for 2.
Yeah, Brandon Ingram didn't miss threes. He was 3 for 3. You know,
Yeah.
CJ McCollum was 6 for 10. These guys hit threes at a higher rate than they normally hit threes. So that, in some ways, like I said, is a hopeful stat. It's really unfortunate to see the potential of Devin Booker not playing as they shift back to New Orleans, because Devin Booker, he plays extremely well in New Orleans and has throughout his career since he was 20 years old. And I will hope that he gets out into that, at least plays one of those 2 games, but I'm not going to say that I hope he plays this next game unless they are fully confident that he's capable of doing that. I don't think there's any point in risking any further injury. I think the Suns have a chance to steal that 3rd game without Devin Booker, and if he can come back by that 4th game, right, that would be ideal, I'd say, for the Suns at this point.
The body language is the thing that scares me, man. You mentioned it earlier, but not that I would expect him to be happy. Obviously, like even if he
just
was,
missing the rest of that game,
even if he was just missing the rest of that game, I understand that would piss him off. He had such a sensational first half, but it was terrible. The body language was terrible. Bad vibes. I don't like
bad
it.
Vibes. The whole bench was awkward.
With respect to the Pelicans shooting, if you want us to expand on an optimistic stat out of tonight, if you look at the Suns' opponent game log this season, there were 9 games where the Suns' opponent shot over 45% from deep as a team. In those 9 games, the Suns went 4-5, so actually below 500. It was one of the only ways to beat the Suns this year naturally.
It's the best way, yeah.
If you just get super unconsciously hot from deep and they can't stop you. And I used 45% as the cutoff there. The Pelicans shot 55% from deep. In fact, not a single team in the entire regular season shot as well against the Suns from deep as the Pelicans did tonight. The team who came closest was Sacramento in, I guess, actually, was that the last game of the season? Sacramento, April 10th. Yeah, shot 54% just a couple of weeks ago then in a game that the Suns also lost that one. So the Pelicans literally shot better than any Suns opponent did for this entire season tonight. There's your one optimistic stat for the night. There you go.
And you combine that with the fact that they just gave them a bunch of free buckets and fast break opportunities, which they don't need to do, something that could be a little easier cleaned up, I think, if they just focus a little more on communicating on fast breaks. And the fact that the Suns essentially allowed them to play a significant stretch of this game with Jackson Hayes guarding Chris Paul in a way that I think they just weren't prepared for, because it's such a weird decision by Willie Green. And it worked because he was able to just confuse them enough to not get good shots and then leak out in transition every time.
Right. Because the Suns really thought that was a matchup that they could exploit. They were specifically trying to pick out Jackson Hayes in those actions so that Chris Paul could target him, and played right into Willie Green's hands that way, because then, exactly as you said, the Pelicans would get the stop. Hayes is a young guy. He's spry. He's athletic. Yes, he's maybe not necessarily the best in terms of all of the team defensive principles at this stage in his career as a younger player, but he can stay with Chris Paul. You know, he's not necessarily going to be on the floor at the slightest crossover or something like that. He's not that type of dude. He doesn't have mobility issues like that. And so then the Pelicans would get the stop after the switch. Jackson Hayes would gun it down the floor. He could get a seal for an early bucket if it was necessary, but most of the time it wasn't even necessary because they would just find him immediately and he would get an easy dunk. And the Suns played right into that. And that was a good example of Willie Green out-coaching Monty Williams tonight. In fact, that was probably the best example that we got from this one.
Yeah, you just can't let a team beat you in the playoffs with fast breaks. That's just not something that you can allow.
It's embarrassing. It really is.
Yeah, that's a great way of describing it.
For a team that has described itself as so, because you're not going to win the rebounding battle anyway, right? All year long, we've been like, oh, it's not a big deal that the Suns don't get rebounds, or offensive rebounds at least, because transition defense is their focus. They're doing it specifically because they're getting back on transition defense. They're loading up early. The math evens out. Well, if you're not getting offensive rebounds, and actually the Suns did have 8 tonight, so I will point out that was better. The rebounding was better than in game 1, but they still got out-rebounded. So if you're still losing the rebounding battle, and you're also hemorrhaging transition points, it's embarrassing. There's no other way around it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, defensively, they can clean that up, right? Run back in transition. I think the game plan, I guess it matters if Devin Booker is out or not, what they do. But more or less, the game plan that they had against Brandon Ingram and CJ made sense outside of how easily they were switching point guards onto Brandon Ingram. I think there were extended stretches of this game where there was just some soft-ass screen, and Chris Paul would just immediately switch onto Brandon Ingram, and then they were operating from a position of trying to send a double at the right time and then recover to shooters as quickly as possible. To me, just don't switch that, and especially when he's not even in a position to shoot. Half the time he was holding the ball on his side just waiting for the fake screen. You can't switch that. And it's the same thing with Cameron Payne. They were switching Cameron Payne onto him multiple times there. Even if that results in a missed shot, if you're sending a second guy at them and they're hot from 3 like they were in this game, I think you can count on them getting a wide open shot in those scenarios. I don't think you can switch on that. Offensively, Chris Paul went 5 for 16. And a lot of those shots are shots that Chris Paul can make. And I think that is sort of one of the outlier things that happened in this game. There were some easy shots that he missed in the first half, which you can say, that's fine. He does that sometimes, and then he picks it up in the fourth quarter. Well, there was a massive distraction in the fourth quarter in this game in that Devin Booker was out, and everyone knew it. And then he just didn't make some shots in that point either. So I
still
think
had 14 assists to 0 turnovers.
Still had 14 assists to 0 turnovers, and it even ended with 17 points. Look, 17 points on 16 shots, not great, but not something that should
not Donovan Mitchell-esque.
You could win that game. It's a winnable game still. You know what I mean? If they just played proper defense, you could win a game where it takes that many shots by Chris Paul. But I think there's 2 areas that are obvious that they can clean up that could turn this into a much better series. The question will be Devin Booker over. I hate to say that over and over and over again, but whether or not he plays, and if he doesn't, I think that makes the game plan for Monty incredibly important. And I'll be honest, I'm not fully prepared to talk about what that would be because I think it would take me some time to think about how they would attack that as well.
Yeah, I have not processed that, and I don't really want to at this stage. I mean,
what do you think about DeAndre Ayton tonight?
He was all right.
10 points, 4 assists, 9 rebounds.
He kind of had a game where he was there.
I think they did a really good job. I think they did a really good job of keeping him away from the rim as much as possible. They were not allowing the lobs. I think there was one lob that he caught cleanly. They were forcing him into that mid-range area. Of course, he can still be efficient with those push shots and some mid-range. But without Devin Booker, if it comes down to a game without Devin Booker, he is the second best offensive player on the floor, third best. I'm not sure what you would say.
I would probably, I don't know. The way he played tonight, it seems to flip-flop every game, but Mikal Bridges probably showed more flashes tonight of being that second guy.
Yeah.
And again, man, I don't want to think about this right now, but yeah, if Booker misses time, then they'll probably run a lot of their same stuff. But like, if they're running elbow, then they'll run Mikal Bridges around that screen instead of Devin Booker. Does that work? I don't know.
Well,
but
they got Shamet too, who played the emergency minutes in this game. It's actually possible they'll start with Shamet. Yeah. Shamet's like, the one thing I'll say about Shamet is his defense chasing people around screens has been good throughout the season. If he does end up playing a lot of minutes here, it's not ideal. This is silly to talk about in a game now where we have to actually scrap to beat the Pelicans in 7, maybe in this series. But I was thinking to myself the other day that in a Warriors series, I think Landry Shamet would come in handy, particularly if you're playing a lineup of Steph, Clay, and Jordan Poole all at once, and you just need as many guys on the court as possible who are willing to embrace the chaser role. And I agree with you. I actually think Landry excels at that. In this series, I was hoping he wouldn't touch the floor. But now here we go. And if he does start, I don't think he's going to play 30 minutes. I think he'll play 16, and the guy who logs more minutes will be Cam Johnson in more lineups like we saw closing out the fourth quarter tonight. Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton, and wings, at which point guys got to hit open shots, and it's really all there is to it. Yeah, it's a tough night where you're thinking, wow, Jay can't hit the broadside of a barn, and then Cameron Johnson checks in and shoots 1 for 6 from 3. Cameron Johnson could do a lot more outside of that three-point shot offensively when it comes to scoring, so I think he still was like relatively okay, still at 11 points, and obviously there's just more options when he's attacking the closeout than with Jay, including getting to the free throw line, which is something that Cameron Johnson could add if he ends up playing extended minutes as well. Cameron Payne, I think there was a stretch in this game where Cameron Payne was a positive in the plus minus. I think there was the best stretch of this game was probably the latter half of the first quarter when Cameron Payne checked in for Chris Paul and things just clicked really well. That is a good sign. I think Cameron Payne could play more minutes. He's still played a relatively small role in these games. I think he still can't hit the broadside of a barn when it comes to shooting either. These guys just need to make shots, right? I mean, I don't know how else to put that. They're getting threes, and they're just not making them.
They shot 37% as a team, but that was Booker carrying them, going 7 of 11. And that makes 2 games in a row now where if you take Booker, I don't have the math in front of me, I can't do it this fast, but if you take what Booker has shot in the first 2 games out of the equation, the rest of the Suns as a team are shooting what, like 25% from deep maybe?
Right.
You can't win a series like that. You can't.
Yep, exactly. We can keep this one short, being that
we will have mercy.
The most hardcore people will be listening to this one. Do you have anything else you want to add here?
Well, I guess we'll just pray for good news regarding Devin Booker. Everyone get in your prayer circle. Get your candles out. I don't know what you use in a prayer circle. Candles? Something like that.
Sure. I don't know. What do I do?
I don't know. I'm not. I've never.
It's not doom and gloom yet. I'll say that. If we want to just end on some sort of positive note,
we'll pray. We'll pray for some good news here, and we'll maybe get back together in a day or two, Mike and I at least, and think up some strategy. I guess depending on what we have at our disposal for Friday. We haven't decided, Mike. By the way, are we doing a Patreon episode this week? Because if we are, at some point, it should probably be for like Wednesday or Thursday.
Let's decide once we know more about the situation here.
So maybe that'll be a chance to talk strategy. Hopefully it'll be good news that we're dealing with at that point.
The Suns have a lot of obvious stuff they can clean up, and they can just play a lot better individually and as a team. Look, maybe it will be doom and gloom depending on what we hear about Devin Booker, but right now we don't know. So as far as we're concerned, we'll be back once we have a better idea of that. We're still doing Game 3 on playback, so that is Friday. If you'd like to join us for that game, you can sign up on our Patreon. If you're a patron, make sure to join us for that one. We will be as positive as you can possibly be. And look, you don't have to listen to the announcers if you don't want to. You can listen to us instead. So we appreciate you guys, and we'll see you then.
For over a century, Johnny Walker has shared its bold spirit with the game of golf. Now, crafted with Devereaux Golf, Johnny Walker introduces the Johnny Walker Blue Label-inspired Sunday Golf Bag, elevating the game with sleek design, Blue Label hues, and refined gold accents. Celebrate your hole-in-one with a premium Sunday bag crafted by Devereaux Golf. Submit proof of your achievement to johnnywalker.com/blue-in-1. Please drink responsibly.